Hi, everyone, and welcome to Brian's Horror Corner. I'm your host, Brian, and welcome to this Christmas horror movie review as part of my Christmas holiday horror movie series for the month of December 2021. Today, we're going to take a look at an absolute classic movie from the 1980s that most people know about, and that is Gremlins from 1984. I have the special edition version here. So it's got a lot of special features, commentaries, trailers, things like that, behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into my review for Gremlins, starting with the setup and the premise and the cast. So Gremlins is a 1984 American comedy horror film directed by Joe Dante and written by Chris Columbus. It draws on legends of folkloric mischievous creatures that cause malfunctions, gremlins, in the British Royal Air Force going back to World War II. The story follows a young man who receives a strange creature as a pet, which then spawns other creatures and transforms into small, destructive, aggressive monsters that all wreak havoc on a whole town on Christmas Eve. So basically, the film opens with a struggling inventor named Randall Peltzer who visits a Chinatown antique store hoping to find a Christmas present for his son Billy. Inside, Randall encounters a small, furry creature called a mogwai. The owner refuses to sell Randall the creature, but his grandson secretly overrules him, warning Randall to remember three important rules. Do not expose the mogwai to light, especially sunlight, it'll kill him. Do not let it come into contact with water, and above all, never feed it after midnight. Randall returns home to Kingston Falls, where he gives the mogwai to Billy as a pet. Billy works at the local bank but fears that his dog Barney will be put down by the elderly miser Mrs. Deagle. Randall names the Mogwai Gizmo, explains the three rules he was told, and Billy makes sure to treat him well. When Billy's young friend Pete accidentally spills water over Gizmo, five more Mogwai spawn from his back, a more troublemaking sort led by an aggressive stripe named after the tuft of fur on his head. So yeah, that's the setup and the premise. It gets us into the movie. Cast wise, we have Zach Galligan as Billy Peltzer, Phoebe Cates as Kate Berger, Hoyt Axton as Randall Rand Peltzer, Polly Holliday as Ruby Deagle, Frances Lee McCain as Lynn Peltzer, Judge Reinhold as Gerald Hopkins, and Dick Miller as Murray Futterman. So yeah, this is just what can you say about Gremlins that hasn't been said before? This is just a fantastic. Not only is it a great Christmas movie and a great horror comedy Christmas movie, I think it's just a great entertaining movie. Period, and it's one of my favorite movies from the '80s without a doubt. Um, you can see Gizmo there, and then I like that. Then it's got like a shadow of an actual gremlin. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can't praise this film enough, but I'm going to yet with the pros that I have. So you have to start with the look of the creatures, the gremlins, very effective and creepy looking, especially obviously once they actually turn into gremlins. When they're just like mogwais, even when they're like the meaner, aggressive ones, they still look relatively cute. But when they actually turn into like the full form these guys, like the green ugly monsters with the big flappy ears. So that's really effective and creepy looking. Great practical effects, especially related to the look and the movement of the gremlins, their eyes, the metamorphosis that takes place, especially for the early to mid '80s. I thought the special effects were really on point here. The movie has great likable characters to follow, like Billy, Kate, Rand Peltzer, and even Murray Futterman, who's kind of a right wing conspiracy theorist. But I always enjoyed Dick Miller and his roles throughout the years, especially in the '80s into the '90s. Um, yeah, Murray Futterman's just really funny. Gizmo's look and voicing, obviously becoming a movie icon. Which, funnily enough, they were actually going to have Gizmo become a gremlin originally. And then I think it was Steven Spielberg that said, or maybe it was Joe Dante, but they said, no, he's too cute. We gotta keep him as sort of one of the good guys in the movie along with Billy. So, um, which obviously I think the movie turned out much more successfully because of that decision. I don't think it would have been as good if Gizmo would have become a gremlin. And, um, yeah, the fact that he not only is he a movie icon, but he becomes kind of a hero at the end of the movie, sort of saving face for the Mogwais overall. I really love the setting in this movie, the small town American setting. that takes place, and very cozy and effective. I feel like the movie's made better because of that. The movie also has pretty good humor. Now, it's more subtle humor. It isn't like in your face kind of slapstick necessarily. It's a very subtle humor, which I really enjoy. That's my favorite kind of humor in movies where they don't have to beat you over the head with it, especially as it relates to Rand Peltzer's inventions, and Murray Futterman's dialogue and right wing views. Those are the things that make me laugh the most. Um, Wonderful Christmas atmosphere throughout the movie. Of course, I have to talk about the Christmas atmosphere as I do with all these movies as part of this series. This movie's at the top of the list. I mean, it's the whole town is decorated in Christmas. You've got Santa people dressed as Santa Clauses. You've got Christmas music, Christmas cookies, baking, Christmas trees that play a pretty significant role midway through the movie. Yeah, there's just a lot of. This is definitely a Christmas movie, if ever there were one. Um, just a lot of Christmas atmosphere in this movie. Um, what there was one other thing I was gonna say. Yeah, Christmas lights. It's just yeah, it's everywhere. Obviously, snow. I like the beginning of the movie with how Gizmo came to be in this town, leading to the Gremlins, etc. It's a pretty basic story, but I think it's a pretty good story. It's not too far out there. I also like the ending and resolution of the movie with Gizmo getting the best of Stripe by using one of the rules against him, where Stripe's on the verge of recreating another whole batch of Gremlins, basically. Um, there's definitely it was kind of hard for me to, because I don't actually have this. I didn't have this in with my horror movies, although I could definitely make an argument to have this in with the Christmas horror movies. It's definitely a darker comedy movie. If you don't consider it a horror movie, I would consider it a Christmas horror movie. But even though it's not really like horror in the same way as like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or even other creature feature movies, it's done in a more 1980s cheesy sort of fun way, but there's still really dark moments in the movie. Especially the story that Kate's character tells about her dad dressed as a Santa Claus. And then also, I didn't realize this until a rewatch, but the Gremlins, especially Stripes, actually pretty violent and aggressive. I mean, he slashes Billy's chest. He shoots an arrow into his arm. He goes after him with a chainsaw. So those elements are enough, I think, to make it. You do have characters that end up dying, even though it's off screen. Mrs. Deagle flies out a window on her her chair-o-matic that goes up the stair-o-matic, whatever it is. I think the Futtermans meet their demise. Well, no, they don't actually, because Mr. Futterman's in the second movie. But I mean, there's horror elements there. There's enough to consider it a horror movie, even though I didn't actually. I just had this in with our regular Christmas movies right next to the Polar Express and White Christmas. So, but I'll probably keep it with my horror movies now because I probably should have known because my wife's never really been partial to this movie when we watch it with other Christmas movies. She doesn't hate the movie or anything, but she just doesn't feel like it fits in with those other Christmas movies I mentioned. Now I kind of know why, because my wife's not the biggest horror fan, so that kind of lends itself well to. Yeah, I guess it is kind of a horror movie because my wife doesn't really like watching it around Christmas because it is a very dark. At the very least, you can say it's a dark Christmas comedy movie. So yeah, moving on. I really enjoy the music and the soundtrack to this movie with the da 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 throughout the movie. That really works for me. It's very 80s. It really fits in well with this movie. Um, the overall tone very 80s. Overall, this is just a comfort movie and with a lot of nostalgia for me. This is one of the first movies actually that my family actually recorded off of TV by setting up, not actually recording it in person, but like a lot of young people will know what I'm talking about, but you could actually like program recordings back in the day, like the late 80s with VCRs. So this was the first movie we ever did that with, actually, or the second. Um, so it has a lot of nostalgia for me with being the 80s, all the Christmas atmosphere, the coziness, despite the premise of the Gremlins. It's just an absolute classic movie overall, and it's also a very good horror Christmas comedy movie. I don't really have any cons for this movie. The only thing is, and this has been talked about, the rules that they give are kind of, especially one of the three rules about feeding them after midnight. My wife always brings this up every year when we watch it. Isn't it always after midnight? technically, and she's right. And I think that's been brought up in other. I think they actually make a reference to it in the second Gremlins movie, the new batch, which I have seen. I'm definitely not as big a fan of that movie. It's okay, but they go a little bit too over the top with that movie. Plus, it all takes place in a like a skyscraper, like an office building in New York. So it just doesn't have the same feel for me. Um, but yeah, some excuse me, guys, still fighting a cold. Um, there's a few missteps there when it comes to the rules, but I mean, it's good because I really had to think about cons for this movie while I was watching. I really can't come up with any. If you're trying to find a horror movie, this obviously isn't going to scare anybody really, unless it's like my son, a 5 year old, which I haven't shown this to him yet. Maybe in a few years, because of the Gremlins, I know I'll have bad dreams about him. But I mean, overall, it's not a scary movie. It's obviously not a gory movie, even though, like I said, Stripe does really he takes his shots at Billy. Billy kind of gets his ass kicked by Stripe for most of the movie. There's cuts and blood in that regard, but it's not like a horror movie gore and blood or anything. So if you're somebody that's looking for that kind of stuff, then you're not going to like this as a horror movie. But again, that's not any of my beefs with it. That's more just for maybe for other people that are looking for a Christmas horror movie in the same sense as like Black Christmas or Silent Night, Deadly Night. This ain't that kind of movie, bro. But this is just a great 80s movie, very fun and entertaining, cozy nostalgia. I'm giving this movie a 9.5 out of. No, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. It's one of my favorite 80s movies. That one little con I had ain't enough to even knock a half a point off. 10 out of 10 for Gremlins. Just a fantastic Christmas dark horror comedy movie. Go ahead and comment down below, guys, what you think of Gremlins. Do you see any cons with it? What do you like about it? Like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my overall horror content, including what I have coming up in the next couple months. But yeah, thank you for watching this Christmas horror video review. Stay scared. Happy holidays. Bye.